Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 98th audio chat on the Q News Patriot Rumble channel series. I am the Q News Patriot, joined today by an in-house roundtable panel of financial experts. My name is SG Anon. On the screen before you today, you will notice two guests that we've not had on the show before. One guest goes by the nomer of Eric, and Eric is a sovereign finance expert, and specifically in quantum mechanics and this coming quantum financial age that we're entering into. On the other hand, we have Mr. Toshi or Sir Toshi. That's an ode to the Satoshi individual behind Bitcoin. And he's here to give us an overview of the digital commodity landscape, the various kinds of Bitcoin, infiltration, not invasion, and how the blockchain landscape of the future is going to tie into a great many concepts that patriots out there have been researching for a long time. I'm extremely excited about our discussion today after having had private discussions off air with both gentlemen. Both of them are experts in their fields and very well adept, I think, to bring commentary to the table. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on Q News Patriot.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure is genuinely mine in this particular regard. I have to admit, the concept of digital commodities, cryptocurrency, intangible assets, fiat currency, all of these different conceptualizations that have come to the fore, certainly in the last 5 years, but have been at play for 15 to 20 years, or in some cases, much longer than that. This is a part of the Great Awakening that a lot of patriots out there are heavily interested in, and quite frankly, to use the pun, heavily invested into. The transition from the prior landscape, the prior economic model that goes back really in its current form more than 1,000 years is happening right now before our very eyes in a fashion that is threatening to remove centralization and the ability of consolidated authority to effect tyranny over landscapes ever again. That's momentous in many regards, and as I purport on this program, it's existential for what we would call our deep state opponents. And yet infiltration, obfuscation, and the ability to misdirect within those landscapes, disinformation, if you will, and then just innocent misinformation makes it very difficult for patriots, and indeed even myself sometimes, to iron out how the financial component may end up looking. So having set that up, I thought we would start today with Eric and move over to Mr. Toshi here in just a minute. Eric, can you give us a little bit of background, how you came to this fight and what your role, without violating any agreements that you have, what your role in this process actually is?
Okay. I spent 25 years in financial services and markets in London. Let's just say that come up to the sort of 2010 banking crash, the sort of second wave of it, as I was actually a CFO, and CEO of a financial services company. Let's just say I started to establish a number of anomalies with what was actually going on in the markets. Especially on and around, let's say, the banking sector, and in particular debt instruments and loans and mortgages. So let's just say that after the crash and coming to a realization that let's just say that the stock markets and debt markets were completely corrupted, I decided to go on a sabbatical and basically leave the industry. After spending 6 months on a golf course, basically, I was, let's say, blessed with a new opportunity in hydrogen technologies, which led me on to, let's say, implementing multiple projects with highly disruptive energy technologies and rolling those out and interfacing them with financial markets and also sovereign applications of, let's say, transcending that energy into assets behind currencies.
Absolutely fascinating. Just to be sure, that was the conclusion of that segment. I had a minor internet connection interruption on that end. You were talking about, you closed off that segment with currency itself, yes?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So let's just say that we're fully aware that the new BRICS mechanism is being rolled out as an asset-based currency system, but also, let's say, rolling new energy and disruptive energy systems into that, let's say, new sovereign asset class. is sort of key focus of my and sort of a few teams around the world current work.
Absolutely remarkable, and sort of serves to confirm what a lot of patriots out there have been gleaning from watching the geopolitical power shifts, the redefinition of some of these markets, and certainly the stringent requirements for some of standardized measure of value, some ability to prevent manipulation within side commerce markets, and indeed now encompassing entire international trading blocks. And that leads me directly to my question for Mr. Toshi, and that is as it pertains to the international facilitation of commerce. We hear buzzwords, we hear XRP, we hear Ripple, we hear Bitcoin. We know there's various different versions and infiltrations of Bitcoin, for example. We see things like FTX being tied back to Ukraine, which confirms to us that at least a significant component part of that crypto landscape or the digital commodity landscape is tied down in dark money behavior. So where does quantum capable digital commodities come into the discussion when we talk about bringing about the engine for international commerce in a transparent and accountable, but also decentralized way?
Big question that. Big question, big answer required. Let's just start off with what money is, because I presume we all know about this global conspiracy that's taking place. Just to give everybody a little bit of background history on that. Obviously, when this COVID thing kicked off, when people were speculating as to what might be behind it, one of the first things I did was look at the M1 money stock. And literally, I'm looking at the M1 money stock right in front of me now, and the M1 money stock is the amount of reserve currency in circulation. And that line should never move, because if it increases, that represents basically counterfeiting, which is inflation. And even like a tiny bit of inflation can cause economic devastation. If you look at the chart going back from 1960 right the way to September 11th, you've got the Afghan war, war on terror, which we know was a load of baloney. The M1 money stock pretty much tripled from then to 2020, and then from 2020, I'm not kidding you, this thing just goes straight up like a rocket, like 5 times. So you're talking like 500% increase. It's just absolutely staggering. So if you want to know what this lot have got in store for us from an economic perspective, that is all you need to know. Literally, it is like an economic Armageddon, and absolutely annihilate everything. There is no justification for this level of currency printing ever. So then I was just like, oh my God, let's get into this. So you literally just have to look back through history at all the historical events and religious documentation and stuff like that. I went right back to the Sumerian tablets, the Sumerian kings list, very interesting. And it's just like, whoa, that's some crazy stuff there. But it ties into the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel 15:3, where God, in inverted commas here, gives an instruction to his chosen people. And the instruction is, now go and destroy Amalek, spare no one, kill everyone, kill every man, woman, child, suckling baby, calf, camel, sheep, and donkey. So literally what we're dealing with here is religious extremism. And these people have been carrying out that instruction literally from 1028 BC. So they've got 3,000 years on us that they've been building this secret organization. And the way they do it is through finance. It's through money. And these people have clearly unbelievably knowledgeable on it, because they know that all legal and political influence stem from economic power. And that's how they basically control absolutely everybody. Their last resort is the bank. That's why if you won't shut up, if you won't accept a bribe, if you're not susceptible to blackmail, the last thing they've got on you, is your bank account, because you need to put a roof over your head and food on the table. So they control everything through the financial system. And it was Henry Kissinger who said, who controls the food supply controls the people, who controls the energy can control whole continents, who controls money controls the world. And indirectly in that statement, what he's doing is he's telling us the order in which they're doing things. First of all, they're going for the control of the financial system. Then they're going to go for the energy companies and utilities. And last of all, they're going to go for the food supply and the farmers, which is what we're seeing right now. So it literally all comes down to money. And just to give everybody a quick recap in case they don't know their history, the year of 1911 is extremely significant. It ties in with 9/11, exactly when that happened, 2001 9/11, because in the year 1911 was when the US government took JD Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company off him. And that was basically his legacy. That was his family's inheritance. It's his family legacy. It was his baby. So even though he was the richest man in the world, that couldn't stop the US government from taking his baby off him. And that was it for him. And 9/11 was all about his family's revenge plot. So 1912, obviously everybody knows who's listening to your show. They sunk the Olympic. They switched it for the Titanic. So it's the Olympic that's down there, which enabled them to claim an insurance, a massive insurance payout. They got rid of Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, Jacob Astor, who were the main objectors to the creation of a central banking system. So when they were out of the way, they brought in the Federal Reserve Act the following year in 1913. Then when you've got a central bank and you've got the ability to print currency, what you then want to do is own all the companies that produce products with the consumable products with the largest profit margins, which are obviously weapons. So there's no coincidence that literally the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and then World War I started the following year in 1914. And the whole point of World War I was to accumulate huge amounts of profits, which they would then use after they'd manufactured the bubble of the Roaring Twenties, to rug pull in 1929, and then purchase all the economically distressed corporations in America. Which is why Milton Friedman said the Federal Reserve was absolutely, fundamentally linked to causing that Great Depression, because they shrank the amount of circulating currency and supply by 30%. So nobody had any currency in order to sustain the high prices of the stocks on the stock market. So they used the profits from World War I to literally scoop up America in the 1930s. And the shareholders of the central bank make profits when the central bank prints currency. So the central bank is always going to be printing currency, but because they weren't printing currency into the US economy anymore, they redirected it into Europe, which is why they set up the Bank of International Settlements in 1930. Then they started funding Hitler in 1933 for the purpose to instigate a war in Europe, to then drain the European countries of the gold reserves. And they were supplying both sides. So they were obviously supplying the Allies, and the Allies were paying in gold. And they were supplying Hitler through the Hamburg America Line Shipping Company. All the European countries were paying for the ammunition in gold to the United States, who were funding both sides, in order to bring about the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, where they turned around and said to the European countries, oh, look at that. You now no longer have enough gold in your banks to back the amount of currency you have in circulation, because we've got it. So therefore, your currency must be backed by our currency, and it's our currency that's going to be backed by gold because we've got it all. The moment they'd achieved the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, the war finished the following year in 1945. They then started printing currency and pumping it into the US economy to create the baby boom period that would overinflate the value of all the corporations they picked up during the Great Depression, in order to legitimately raise capital against them to then purchase all the European corporations that Hitler had decimated for them. That's what the majority of people miss. And then in 1940, from 1944, while the baby boom period was going on, they were then engineering social, political, and financial reform in Japan, in their Japanese central bank, where the Japanese central bank would also be responsible for creating what they call the Japanese economic miracle, which again was just like a massive bubble from the 1970s to the 1990s, to then rug pull, and then scoop up all the Japanese corporations. And so people think that Japan is kind of like this, model for capitalism, but really Japan is just simply a nation of cartels, owned and controlled by their central bank, which is now part of the central banking cartel and network. And then they did the same thing via the International Monetary Fund to the tiger economies of South Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia, and all around that. So, and this is why the huge investment funds of BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard started popping up around the 1970s or 1960s, 1970s, because they needed asset managers to start managing all these corporations that they were scooping up all around the world. But what underpins everything, literally everything, is their control of the banking system and finance. And I know a lot of your people on your show will be talking about this, NASARA JASARA thing. And NASARA is the National Economic Security and Recoveries Act. But again, it's called an act, but every act has a date next to it. And so none of these NASARA JASARA has a date next to it. The JASARA stands for the Global Economic Security and Recovery Act. Again, no date on that whatsoever. But the thing is, you can't reform a fraud, and it's currency that is the fraud. So just to give people a basic education on economics, there are literally only four things that circulate within an economy. You have goods that are manufactured, you've got services that are provided, you have commodities that are common to everyone and that are therefore only ever extracted or grown. So there's no human barrier to entry to accessing them. And then you have securities, which are just either tokens, tickets, gift cards, certificates, just an item that is one step removed from whatever it is you want to secure your claim on. That's why they're called securities, because you would have this token, this ticket, like a token would, secure your entitlement to enter an arcade. A ticket would secure your entitlement to enter a concert. A share certificate would secure your entitlement to receive a dividend, owning shares in a company. A gift card would secure your entitlement to, purchasing goods on, let's say one of these cabal sites like Amazon, whatever. So that's what the main difference between commodities and securities are. So where does money and currency fit into that? Well, it's like this. So you only ever need a medium of exchange when a third party comes into trade and an economy is created. So if there's just two of you, you can barter, you can do like for like, you can swap, a dress for jeans, you can swap a jumper for a coat, whatever you see fit. But when a third person comes into trade, you need something of common value so that all those parties can then exchange goods and services for a similar value between one another. Now, the word commodity is an amalgamation of three words. It's first of all something that's common, that's then been itemized and then uniquely identified. So that's literally, if you look at the word commodity, you can see it. It's common, item, identified. Commod, it, IDTY, commodity, which is common, item, identified. So the common item is first of all extracted or grown. It's then been itemized. So coffee is bagged, oil is barreled, water is bottled, and then it's uniquely identified. So you can have a claim on that item, and you can then exchange that item for a good or service or of a similar value, with someone else. Now, if you're using a commodity as this medium of exchange, because the medium of exchange is a tool that enables, encourages, and accelerates the facilitation of trade, it means that these mediums of exchange are economically competitive. So over time, there will only be one because they'll outcompete one another. And so what happens is when a commodity monopolizes a market due to its ability to be used as a medium of exchange, it becomes a monopoly commodity and recognized as money. The mon is the singular, the Y is the commodity. So money is a monopoly commodity. What about currency then? Well, it's like this. Let's say you start using a security, which is a claim on something of value. We have the certificate, like the claim on gold or something like this. Securities are issued by a higher authority that will back up your claim of the secured entitlement to whatever it is there might be a dispute over. So a security can only exist in a closed economic area or private community where that authority has the power to back up that claim. So when a security starts being used as a medium of exchange within a closed economic area or private community, it becomes a circulating security. and a current flows and circulates. So a circulating security is just simply amalgamated into the word currency. So it's currency that is actually meant to transfer and transport the security of the money to someone else. You're meant to exchange it. But if you remove money from currency, that's when you end up with securities fraud. But because the cabal, the powers that be, don't want us calling it securities fraud, they were just like, oh, let's rebrand it, and they'll be all right with it. Let's call it fiat currency, and they'll be like, oh, that's all right, then it's fiat currency. And so that's what we're using. But the issue is that currency, even if it's fiat currency and it's fraud, and by the way, anybody who wants case law on this, this is absolutely essential for case law. The case is SEC, which is Securities and Exchange Commission, versus W.J. Howie Co. 1946, that defines what a security is. And a security is, they have a Howie test, which is an investment of money in an investment of money, so an investment of value in a common enterprise. A common means it's open to one and all, with the expectation of profit based on the efforts of others. That's how they defined what a security is. And I forgot what I was going to say then. Where was I? Remind me. I was talking about
with respect to the separation of currency, money, and the SEC case law behind the schism inside those concepts.
Yeah. So it's the currency that is meant to transfer the claim on the money. You remove money from currency. Now, if you want to know what the most valuable money is going to be, all you need to do is commoditize the most useful resource. And this is why so many people are going on about cryptocurrency and digital stuff right now, because they know that this lot literally orchestrated World War I and World War II for the sole purpose of getting their hands on the gold so that they could implement the Bretton Woods Agreement and effectively get control of the financial system. And for those who are interested, Albert Pike wrote his famous letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, outlining how it would require 3 world wars to bring about a totalitarian one world government and new world order on the 15th of August, 1871. Now, anybody who knows the history will say, oh, right, well, the Nixon shock was the 15th of August, 1971. And that's why they orchestrated the Nixon shock on that date, because it was the 100-year anniversary of Albert Pike's letter to Mazzini. And basically, it was a nod to him saying, right, well, now we've got control of the financial system. We've effectively done it. Because there is literally nothing that anybody could do now. We have got the money, which is the gold. And as JP Morgan said in 1912, gold is money, everything else is credit. And again, he was absolutely spot on. They were just like, right, nobody can stop us now because we've got all the gold, which means we have the monetary resources. We've got internet banking now, which is basically digitized the claim on gold, and we've removed the gold from that, so we can effectively create as much of this digital crap and nonsense as we want. There's nothing that can stop us, because it's their control of the financial system that underpins everything. And if they thought that they were going to lose control of the financial system, that is when they would get worried. So it seems recently that they're moving exceptionally fast. And so I'll just explain why they're moving really fast at the moment. So if you look at the Bitcoin white paper, the Bitcoin white paper was released on the 31st of October, 2008. And what that actually did is it expressed for the first time in history how to commoditize digital data. In other words, it was a way to actually give data value. So we would actually have a use case. That use case would then generate demand, and that demand would set a market price, using the economic forces of supply and demand. And this is why they actually released the SPARS pandemic on the anniversary of the Bitcoin white paper, because the SPARS pandemic effectively countered the Bitcoin white paper. The Bitcoin white paper expressed how we can actually have a true money again, and a totalitarian dictatorship cannot exist or be created in a society or an economy that uses a true money, because they can't enrich themselves. But likewise, you can't have a true money that exists under a totalitarian dictatorship, because the totalitarian dictatorship owns and controls all the resources. So they were just like, whoa, well, we haven't got any of this resource because we don't know how to do it. And some guys just expressed how to actually do it. But if we try to install a totalitarian dictatorship through the back door, guised as guised as a medical emergency, then then we can hopefully maybe counter that, because we've spent thousands of years trying to fulfill this Talmudic prophecy, where we will own and control the world and have 2,800 slaves each. So they published the SPARS pandemic on the 31st of October 2017, and they implemented the first lockdown in early 2020. And the reason they effectively shit themselves and implemented the lockdown in early 2020 is because Satoshi Nakamoto, the guy who created Bitcoin, knew that the Bitcoin network had to go through a period of commoditization, which is a period of neutral organic growth without any central point of influence, which is why he used a pseudonym. So first of all, everything on the network has to be common, and there has to be a common starting point. And a common starting point just means that you have to provide a common, equal, and reasonable opportunity for anyone and everyone to start the network themselves. And in law, a reasonable amount of time is considered 2 months. And this is why he released the white paper on the 31st of October, because 31st of October is Halloween. And the two busiest months of the year are the festive period, which is November and December. So that gave him the best opportunity of being able to start the network. But if somebody else had actually taken the information in the white paper and started the network before he did, that could have potentially literally thrown all of his years of work down the toilet in one foul swoop. Which is why he was just like, right, okay, I need to give myself the best opportunity so I can start the network under a pseudonym and then just simply step back. So then you have to ask, well, how long are you going to leave it for this network to undergo this period of neutral organic growth? Well, if you're down a casino and you're playing red or black, there's a 50-50 chance that you'll throw red or black on the first turn, and then there's a 25-75 chance the pattern will follow, like two reds in a row, and then the chances goes down and down and down the more the pattern continues. So the chances of you throwing 10 reds in a row is 0.01%, which means there's a 99.9% chance that you won't throw 10 reds in a row. So he was just like, right, if I try to let this network grow for a period of 10 years, each year being classified as a turn, at the end of 10 years, there is a 99.9% chance that no other network will achieve this level of neutral size and growth. And that is what no other digital network can replicate. Because anybody can make a digital commodity. All you need is a competitive network with a chain of digital signatures with unbounded scale, so that limitations and restrictions can't be manufactured and the network not be manipulated. You need a fixed token supply so that nobody can either inflate it or deflate it. And then you just simply need to make sure that all those elements are locked and that they're never changed. That's just simply it. But what they can't replicate is this neutral size and growth. And Satoshi had arranged for the Satoshi coins, which everybody knows is the 1.1 million Bitcoin in the Tulip Trust, to be returned back to him on the 1st of January 2020. And those coins were actually returned to him via bonded courier on the 14th of January 2020. And this case has already been decided in a court case by a trial by jury, which is literally the highest court in the land, sort of in the world. And the cabal was so concerned that he was going to use this Tulip Trust to convert the economic wealth, or the economic market value, back into the original Bitcoin protocol that they brought in lockdown. Literally, that's why lockdown happened in early 2020, because that's when the Satoshi coins were returned back to him, and they thought he was going to come out, prove who he was, and effectively blow their whole deception and fraud of cryptocurrencies out of the water. And one of the things that they did, they realized that when you send a transaction, like particularly a digital transaction, in order to validate that transaction, there has to be a digital signature with it. Because if you send a digital transaction and there's no digital signature with it, nobody has a claim on it. You can't tell who sent it or who's received it. And more importantly, if that is a transaction of value and you don't get the good or service that you expected in return, or the individual you send it to does a runner, then you want to go to a third party who can solve this dispute for you. And the first thing they'll ask for is the evidence. Can you prove that you made that transaction? Is your digital signature on it? If your digital signature is not on it, you cannot prove shit. And it literally invalidates the entire transaction. So in the same way that a contract is invalid if there's no signature on it, it's the same with a digital transaction. If there's no digital signature on that transaction, you've got no claim in it, and therefore there is no economic value. So sending a digital, a digital transaction is literally like sending a digital contract of value. No signature, no nothing. But that's not enough to just simply have a signature. If you've got people transacting on a network and there is no way to hold them to account, it means that accountability and responsibility then lies with the operations who are sustaining that network. Now, you want to protect them as much as possible. So what you actually need to do is completely move accountability and responsibility from those multiple operations that are economically competitive to one another onto the users of the network. And this is why you need a chain of digital signatures. So if there is gun running, child trafficking, drug dealing, warmongering, whatever going on within that private network, the users and members of that network need to be able to effectively come to consensus and go, actually, we don't want that kind of behavior in our society. So therefore, you can use that chain of signatures to effectively, who did you send a transaction to? Who did you send that to? Who did you send that to? Who did you send that to? Ah, right, it's him. So the chain of digital signatures eventually leads to the living man or woman that are behind the transaction that may be involved in these nefarious activities that you don't want. So every attack on Bitcoin has always been on the chain of digital signatures. And this is what the cabal did on the 24th of August, 2017. They implemented what they called SegWit. And they were very careful not to use the word signature because they didn't want people to sort of pick up on what they'd done. But seg, again, means separated with a divide between the two. And then the witness is actually the signature data. So they just used the word witness instead of signature. So when they segregated the digital signatures from the transaction data, they were telling people, oh, look, well, the signature data takes up about 60% of the transaction. If you remove 60% of the data, there's more chance of you getting it confirmed within a block. But what they didn't tell you was that actually by removing your signature from that data, you've got no claim on that transaction whatsoever. And it is contractually illegitimate and economically worthless. And so when they did that, the one thing they couldn't hide is that when you make a fundamental change to a protocol, that results in a realized and a material change in the legacy addresses that you use, because it's the legacy address that enables you to identify that you're sending and receiving your Bitcoin, as it were. So the moment they implemented SegWit, the legacy addresses started to change, and all genuine Bitcoin legacy addresses start with number 1. So if you go back and you look at the first Satoshi Nakamoto to Hal Finney transaction, and then the Marty Maumee transaction, and then the famous Bitcoin Pizza Day transaction, they all went from and were received by addresses beginning with number 1. But on the 24th of August, 2017, these addresses changed on BTC and started to begin with either the number 3 or the letters BC, which basically means you've now got, a fraud, because tampering with signatures, whether they're wet ink or digital, is fraud. It's straight up fraud. So when they realized that Satoshi Nakamoto was going to get his coins returned to him on the 1st of January 2020, they were just like, oh my God, what he's going to do is he's going to flip the economic value of our alternative shit coin that we've created because we've removed all value from it back into the original protocol that has legacy addresses starting beginning with the number 1. And those legacy addresses that always begin with number 1 are now, well, it's still the original Bitcoin protocol that goes right back to the Genesis block, but it simply has the ticker symbol BSV. So it just means that the ticker symbol BTC is now the largest financial fraud in history. You had like Bernie Madoff, who had a Ponzi scheme that was like $60 billion. BTC has now got a $1 trillion market cap. You're looking at a $1 trillion fraud. And then also, in order to distract people away from this one protocol that actually threatens their economic power and dominance, they created an entire market of shitcoins. Proof of stake, for example, if you would consider a shitcoin, because there is no economic opportunity cost in maintaining the stake. And if there's no economic opportunity cost, it means the system is not economically competitive. And if it's not economically competitive, then it's centrally controlled, because there's no other way for a system to operate. It's either economically competitive, where individuals are incentivized to operate the system due to economic rewards, or they're not, and they just do it because they centrally control the system. And again, that's what proof of stake is. And I mean, pre-mined like XRP and Tron and Stellar is even worse. They're not even distributed, let alone economically competitive. And because they're not economically competitive, like for example on XRP, where David Schwartz, who is the chief technical officer, said when he was questioned as to how Ripple Labs got more than 50% of the overall supply of XRP, and he said, "Oh, right, well, those who created the system when they developed it put all the tokens up for grabs, and lots of people grabbed." The coins from the system, and so those who created the system ended up with the majority of them. I mean, and again, this whole cryptocurrency is a complete psyop, because if they lose control of the financial system, they lose control of everything. And if people realize that you can now actually use digital data as a medium of exchange, and they've commoditized it so it can actually be used as money, the moment we start using that money, we get outside of this central banking system. But because Bitcoin itself actually economically sustains the world's first common digital network, we can now use that digital network for all of our digital requirements, like literally emails, phone calls, HD video streaming, like, financial transactions, you name it, social media requirements. Everything can be done on the Bitcoin network. And that's what they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know that you buy Bitcoin in order to use the network. That is what they're shitting themselves about so badly. So yeah, I know I've waffled on a bit, but I'll stop there if you've got any questions.
Well, fundamentally, I have a tremendous amount of questions, but I think I'm going to start with a couple of simple questions. And one of them I'm going to direct to Mr. Eric, if I could. And that deals with this concept of having originated basically a completely new monetary landscape in the form of the commoditization of digital data, and how that commoditization marketplace was allowed a period of time to organically, in other words, spiritually driven, I think, proliferate and to propagate itself out into the world. And so with that being in mind, we know that we're moving towards a world here that the proliferation of digital data is going to be bigger than it's ever been before. Quantum itself, I believe, is the marriage of both the digital and the physical, understanding that we are all indeed one, that there is no separation between the tangible and the intangible, though we've been brainwashed for hundreds of years to believe that there is. So with that, Mr. Eric, can you weigh in on the philosophical side of the enormous context and background that Satoshi has just laid out for us as it pertains to the redefinition of commerce worldwide?
Absolutely. Toshi, can I just say, absolutely amazing. What we're going to do after, let's say, the first class for kindergarten, we can talk about in the next session. Just absolutely astounding information.
Thank you very much.
So let's just say that one of the key elements of digitized data is its integrity. And one of the key things, let's say, that Satoshi put in there, and yes, we all know who Satoshi is now, he put in an independent time clock. So it was, in its original stage, actually referred to as time coin. When you understand the consequences of having an indelible data log that is true to time and that cannot be manipulated to create different, let's say, histories and redefine the pathway of mankind, what let's say Satoshi has actually done is create that indelible digitized log of mankind's history. Now, that is priceless. Nobody can put a value on truth and truth coin, aka time coin, aka BSV. So the profound, let's say, consequences of truth for mankind is what we're actually dealing with now. There is no hiding. There is no more lies. Each and every lie will be exposed, and those that let's say that have been complicit in crimes against humanity will be digitally exposed, because every single event that they did, operated in every single financial market, is already data logged and stored. But what Craig Wright's, let's say, invention of Bitcoin does is allow us all to participate in that value of truth and integrity moving forward.
It sort of brings a new dimension to the idea of we have it all, which is expressed by a well-known entity online, and certainly an entity that I draw a great deal of inspiration from. And so that's going to lead me sort of to my next question, also inspired by that entity, talking about disinformation being real. Mr. Toshi, you mentioned just a moment ago that Ripple XRP and a number of other coins fundamentally may represent more centralized extensions of authority rather than the decentralized mantra that we're told. We recently saw an SEC ruling pertaining directly to XRP and Ripple, and when we connected privately, you had a very different interpretation of that I was intrigued by. Do you care to give us sort of an overview of XRP, Ripple, and these other coins, piggybacking off what you were saying a moment ago, and how this may tie back to more of a misdirection operation rather than anything else? And the reason I asked the question before I allow a moment for the response is that we recently saw President Trump spend a considerable amount of time at the Bitcoin Entrepreneur Conference. I believe it was held in Nashville, Tennessee, and he also publicly endorsed Bitcoin individually and sort of in a focalized fashion by becoming the first U.S. president and head of state to utilize Bitcoin in a transaction. And I take that as an endorsement and a major clue going forward. So with that, I'll yield for the question.
Yeah, sure. So just going back to XRP and Stellar and Tron, they're all pre-mined. Literally, all they do is use a blockchain. So blockchain is just simply the process that allows data to be uploaded onto the network and linked to other bits of data. So it means that you can't change that data that's been uploaded without changing all the data that's on it. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that that network that has all the digital information linked together has a foundation that doesn't have any central point of failure. That's why you need that's why you need a globally distributed, economically competitive server network, so that if one server goes offline, the network just still continues. And the data can't be deleted because it's all linked together on this, economically competitive, globally distributed network. So there's no central point of failure. XRP just simply doesn't have that globally distributed, economically competitive server network because it's literally all owned and controlled by Ripple Labs. And that's one of the reasons why they can't scale either. Because it's literally just a database owned and controlled by Ripple Labs. You take Ripple out and XRP just completely disappears. So it's not even distributed, let alone economically competitive. And because it's not economically competitive, they can't process transactions by using computational power. So therefore, what they have to do is they have to burn. They burn a token to balance the ledger whenever a transaction is made. That's the only way they can actually balance their ledger because it's not economically competitive. And that's the same way that Tron and Stellar and all these other coins work. But in terms of the SEC ruling, so it's like this. In an economy, again, as I said before, you've got goods, services, commodities, and securities. Now, goods are manufactured, so you can tell if something is a good or not. Services are provided, they can't be transported, but when you've received a service. A commodity is only ever extracted or grown, so when you've received one of those. And securities are issued by centralized authorities. And XRP is obviously issued by Ripple Labs, as David Schwartz explained. But the thing is, when they went to court and they defined that XRP was not a security, well, the thing is, if it's not a good, if it's not a service, if it's not a commodity, and if it's not a security, what you've actually created is securities fraud. There's no other option. So if XRP is not defined as a security, so in other words, they don't view it as an investment of money in a common enterprise, and obviously, anybody is able to purchase XRP on these exchanges, so that's your common enterprise, and people are purchasing it with the expectation of profit, derived from the efforts of others, which is Ripple Labs, and they're saying that that's not a security. Well, it's fraud because you're buying a token that has no common value. Some people are saying, oh yeah, but transacting XRP is peer-to-peer. Well, if you're going to say that transacting XRP is peer-to-peer, then you can argue that sending a message on Facebook Messenger is peer-to-peer. It's completely owned and centrally controlled by Ripple Labs. So if it's not a security, then what they've created is securities fraud. That's it. What was the other one that you mentioned after that?
Well, actually, the other part of it was just sort of a reflection of how some of the other coins out there and the exchanges may be operating in that fashion. But if I may, I'd like to sort of pivot off what you just stated, because I've heard it put out there, and I'll be completely honest, I've shied away from much public comment on it because it's not my wheelhouse of expertise, and it deals with the infrastructural capabilities of XRP, and I think there's another one, XLM, when it comes to cross-border transactions. Can you comment a little bit about that and why the BSV organic original digital server network is at least a viable option, otherwise perhaps even superior to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just literally with the original Bitcoin protocol, with it being commoditized data, it economically incentivizes more computing power to come onto the network. It literally invites it onto the network. And with an uncapped block size, there is unbounded scale, which means that transactions can be sent literally, almost like as fast and as efficient as light on an economically competitive, globally distributed network. And you wouldn't want data on any other network, because on any other network that doesn't have those 5 elements, the data is vulnerable. It's deleted. Oh yeah, it can be deleted because there's a central point of failure. And the whole point of Bitcoin is that Bitcoin economically sustains the first digital network that doesn't have any central point of authority or control. Because, like I said before, a digital network is either centrally controlled, and in which case, whatever it produces has no value to anyone else because it's not common. And this is where the SEC recently went after sites like I think it's OpenSea or something like that, where they're selling all these supposedly sort of NFT artworks and stuff. If you are creating a digital bit of art as in the form of an NFT, but that digital bit of art and that NFT, the non-fungible token, is still on a centrally controlled network, then it is still a security and would need to be registered with the SEC as a security, because you're selling it. You're selling a digital token on a centrally controlled network. However, if you create a bit of artwork like an NFT on a commoditized network, then you own and control the artwork, because there is no central point of authority or control actually on the network itself. That's what's so important. And if you're sending a financial transaction, and that financial transaction actually carries with it value, economic value, you can't afford for that bit of data to be compromised or cracked, altered, changed, or deleted. And so the only network that it can run on is the network that Satoshi Nakamoto designed, that follows the original Bitcoin protocol. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Incredible. So my next question is directed over to Eric, sort of off of that exact same subject, and it deals with the quantum mechanics side and also the multinodal side of what we're dealing with worldwide. Now, ever since I began hearing the concepts, the buzzwords really, quantum financial system, quantum capable currency exchange, all of these other, pardon me, all of these other words that have come out and have caused, or phrases that have caused a very considerable concept to swell in the consciousness of mankind, fundamentally, which I believe is a good thing, where we've needed a new way of thinking and looking at things, I think, certainly for generations. But fundamentally, what made the most sense to me was about how such a decentralized distributed system would itself have to present itself geopolitically and internationally in a decentralized way, and yet also have alignable or perhaps intercapable components of a new technology or a new era style landscape. I think we could summarize that as just the quantum landscape or the quantum age. Some people call it the golden age. So with that in mind, Eric, can you comment a little bit on how what Satoshi is talking about with respect to BSV and this authentic version of Bitcoin that existed pre-2017, how that could play into a quantum mechanically capable financial landscape?
Okay, so if we can go back to let's say the difference or disparity in between a security and a commodity. Our whole current financial system, i.e., let's say fiat currency, is created off of a security. And predominantly, that security is each and every living man, woman birth certificate. So those birth certificates have been commoditized through local governments, through local authorities, through counties, through governments, right the way back through to the central, let's say, treasury-federal mechanism. All as we need to do is basically switch that security, the fake security that was sold through our birth certificates without our permission or power of attorney, and basically flip those securities into a commodity that is issued to each and every living man, woman, child. And we can also repatriate, so reward and reimburse assets that have been historically stolen on let's say the fake fiat blockchain, and repatriate that back to a new asset-based blockchain, decentralized, which basically means that we have control. We are the central banks. We become the distributed banking system, and each and every man, woman, child, living man, woman, child, not dead entities or corporations that have been made up and basically, let's say, layered into fake maritime law. Those assets can be used for basically for the benefit of mankind, and we can genuinely have a vote and independent choice and freedom to choose how our money is spent if we are bank of our sovereign self.
Incredible. So utilizing the quantum component, if you will, or perhaps the self-autonomy, de jure authority that's present just by being alive as the basis for financial and commercial value exchange. Is that a correct interpretation?
Absolutely, and let's just say that each and every one of those fake securities issued through birth bonds is created through let's say the value of our energy. They parasite off of our energy. So this is basically where we flip the script, we flip the charge, we flip the energy system so that basically they now work for us. And we are the energy providers. We are the creators. We are the distributed nodes. We are the distributed energy system.
Very, very interesting. So my last question then is going to come over to Mr. Toshi, and it deals with obviously the future and challenges to come, obstacles that we may still face. But I want to sort of preface the question with a bit of a context, and that is the idea that the U.S. government corporation itself has been in some form or fashion bankrupted, and that that is facilitating or helping to facilitate the death of the old, what we would call central banking system, fiat, fake currency system. Really, the best way to say it, I think, is fake, fraudulent monetary system that we have in the world. So with that as a backdrop and as a sort of a basis for the discussion, what challenges remain in marrying the blended landscapes of both physical and digital value exchange, and also moving into a societally focused quantum landscape?
Yeah, good question. So I'll come back to that in just a second, because I remembered what I was going to say before when I had a mind blank. I was going to say the issue is currency. Because even if you have a currency that's backed by an asset, like let's say it's backed by gold, the fact is, and the main problem with currency is that it has to be inflated. It can't be any other way, because a currency is issued. And a currency is meant to represent like the value of the commodity. And if the commodity is fixed in supply and therefore increasing in value, they would have to revalue those securitized notes that they were issuing. Now, if you revalue those securitized notes that they're issuing, that would actually cause an issue with the security of the currency, because if you're constantly creating new ones, then they can be counterfeited and you have all sorts of problems. So what they do is they don't bother creating more currency. They just simply print more, and that's the fundamental problem with all economies. It's inflation. Because when inflation happens, if you're a small business or even a large one, unless you can increase your prices in line with inflation or somehow reduce your overheads, you're constantly fighting an uphill battle to stay profitable and in business. So even if you're using a fiat currency just simply means that it's not backed by anything, and therefore the criminals that have got that are in control of it are probably going to inflate it into infinity. So it just means that inflation is going to happen even quicker if it doesn't actually represent anything of value. Whereas what we need to do is go back to using a money, and a money is divided, because it's effectively, for want of a better word, it's almost like unbounded or infinitely divided. And being digital, this thing can be literally infinitely divided, because you can always add another zero. And the way this monetary system would work, or is going to work, is that in the same way that a kilogram is a unit measurement of weight, and a volume is a liter is a unit measurement of volume, fiat currency is a unit measurement of value. So if I was to say to you, I've got a kilogram, your question would be like, well, that doesn't make sense. What do you have a kilogram of? Same with if I had a liter. Well, what have you got? You got a liter of water, a liter of oil, a liter of air. Like, what have you got? And it's the same when somebody mentions, I have got, £10, $10, 10 euros. Your question should be, okay, well, that £10, $10, 10 euros is a unit measurement of value. So what is the item of value that you have? What do you have $10 of that's value? So when a true money comes along, a true money will end up taking on the market capitalization of every single market that is actually measured in fiat currency. Because in the future, you won't be selling your $300,000 house for $300,000 of nothing but bits of paper. You're gonna be swapping it like for like. You'll be purchasing or selling that house, the $300,000 house, for $300,000 worth of Bitcoin, that is a commodity that can be used as money, in order to exchange it for something else of a similar value. And that's effectively what we need. And going back to your question that you just asked me about how this fits in with where we are now, with what Eric was saying, if we have a common digital network where the information on it cannot be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted, which effectively means we have a digital doomsday clock, like a truth machine. And you always have truth first, because you can't just create a lie out of nothing. A lie is what subverts the truth. And if the truth can't be deleted, then you can't get away with manufacturing a lie about it, because you can always trace it back to the origins. So that means that when we start creating, and like Eric was saying about how we are the value, we are the value because we create. we create things of value. And when we create those things and we can put them on a digital network that can't be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted, that wealth can then be distributed amongst everybody, because what we will, and also we own and control that digital data, because you upload it onto a network that doesn't have any central point of failure, that's got your signature on it, that proves that the information is yours. So you can either sell it or license it or distribute it to onto a globally distributed, economically competitive network. And that's where, in this new sort of like, quantum landscape, or whatever you want to call it, we're literally entering a new golden age where people will be creating something for the betterment of others. You'll be like, right, because if we're using something that's got genuine value, they'll be like, right, actually, I'm going to create this because it's valuable, and therefore that might encourage you to exchange the value that you've got in your pocket in the form of Bitcoin for the idea that I had, the idea that I have that's going to benefit you. Whereas if we're using fiat currency, all you're literally trying to do is trying to screw over your customers as much as possible. How can I create as much value for myself and not them, and basically screw them over? So it literally completely flips the current economy on its head, where instead of people are acting selfishly for their own interests, you're now going to be acting for the benefit of others by adding value to their lives in exchange for true value that they have.
And just briefly on the back of that, the let's say the corporate problem is basically theft off of creators. And just
Absolutely.
exactly the same as Craig Wright has found, every single, let's say historic, let's say legendary inventors, some of which created our world as we know it today, aka Nikola Tesla, and a whole tranche of let's say inventors, where they've had that asset stolen off of them, inverted into a corporation, stolen, thieved for the benefit of a few, is where we, let's say, can use this mechanism to wind up the corporations for once and for all, and decentralize, let's say, equitable ownership through a decentralized mechanism, aka Bitcoin BSV.
Yeah, and also, just adding to that, Eric, as well, the legacy addresses lead to the living man and woman behind that address, because only a living man and woman can actually open and create a Bitcoin wallet. So it means that finally this facade, this veil of anonymity that the cabal used to protect themselves behind these corporate entities will now finally be exposed, because only living men and women can make a Bitcoin transaction. So yeah, it's going to be huge.
Exactly, and it's quite interesting that, let's say, a recent um, legal lawful precedent has just been exposed. I think it's Penhallow and Doan from 1795, where basically, let's say, the Supreme Court in America has confirmed that basically no corporation has any jurisdiction over living man woman.
Yeah, and that needs to be put on the blockchain so it can't ever be deleted.
I had to
Yeah.
find it on a few archive sites. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and SG, just reference that. I think you did a post. I think it was reference the quo warranto affidavits. And once you have the quo warranto affidavits interface with the Penhallow-Doan case, I think we have a pretty compulsive case for the end of corporations and beginning of a new era for living man and woman.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Nova Yuval Harari said, who controls the data controls the future. Well, in the future, all data will be on chain, because digital data is too precious to lose. And you wouldn't create digital information if you wanted it to be deleted. The only reason you would create digital information to be deleted is if you had nefarious intentions for it, and therefore you purposely created it to commit a crime, and therefore you knew in the future you would want it to be deleted. So in that we're going to be entering a new age of trust and truth and honesty and real value.
and terrorists don't like that.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I have to say this has been one of the most fascinating discussions that we've ever had here on QNP. I guess I'm going to open it up for any last and final closing thoughts and any wishes from my guests on if they wish or not to be contacted by Patriots.
Do you want to go first, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can contact me via the Rumble thread that will be on the bottom of this podcast. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, if people want to follow my channel, it's yeah, I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but I mean, yeah, YouTube have already deleted like 3 of my channels in the past because I was educating on the Segwit fraud on BTC, you know. But yeah, if you want to go to YouTube, it probably after I mention it up here, it probably won't be up for too long because I'll take it down again. But it's youtube.com/@BSV Bitcoin.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I make no apologies for saying contact via the Rumble channel because I've already been banned from Telegram, and also from LinkedIn and a couple of other channels that are, yeah, let's say trivia. But let's say that there is potential litigation cases ongoing there, in those particular, yeah, let's say censorship issues.
Well, I have to say, I appreciate both of you and your time and the attention and really the thoroughness and exhaustive detail that you've given on this discussion today. I know my audience will appreciate it. I certainly appreciate it. It's no accident that today's chat ended up being 9 + 8, which is 17, again, in reference to an entity that I take a great deal of inspiration from. So it's been a pleasure. And for the audience out there, I hope you've very much enjoyed the discussion, the conversation, and the rigorous detail. I encourage all of you to go and research these things for yourself, back them up, prove them to whatever degree is necessary. And if you feel so compelled, please reach out and follow the work. This is SG
Oh,
Anon.
great. Just one thing, digital information or digital data can only be commoditized one way, which means there will only be one digital commodity. I'll end on that.
And there you have it, folks. I'll be back with each of you again soon on the Q News Patriot. This is SG Anon. Thanks, everyone. God bless. Bye-bye.
God bless.